Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park. And today we bring you Read One of Snowglobe by Soyoung Park. Now, what we find out about Snowglobe is that it's this whole reality venture, and we're in this futuristic realm of dystopia, and everything is frozen. The natural climate is negative 50 degrees, but we have the snow globe area that is climate controlled. Everyone's living prosperously, but in exchange for that, they have to be a part of a reality show.
Mm-hmm.
Reality shows for us weren't always a part of our lives, I don't think.
No, at least not when I was single.
Yeah, and I watched a little bit. I like here and there, I would see some types of show, and it was never watching the big stuff like Big Brother or Survivor or I don't know, the other ones that are there. I did watch Jersey Shore growing up. That was one of the original reality shows I did watch. But during the pandemic, I think what ended up happening was we started finding ourselves in this zone of being able to binge watch all these reality shows.
I think it was because we were so inundated with all these reality shows coming out all at once. For example, not that we endorse it, but for example, Tiger King.
Hmm.
It was something that caught our attention. It caught the attention of many people, and so we wanted to see what the hype was. And I think that's how it got to us. We wanted to see what the hype was for different reality shows, and then it became a part of our roster of everyday living.
Right. And for me, it's always been the human story. I've always been interested in what the human story is. So documentaries, memoirs, bibliographies, like those are
Mm,
always something that have interested me. And reality shows at its core is meant to be a storytelling of someone's life. Nowadays, it's very different. They have kind of morphed into game shows and this vie for popularity for a lot of people.
mm-hmm.
But with all that said, we do still consume a lot of reality shows.
Yes.
Amongst those, my question for you is if you're in Snow Globe and you had to be part of one of those reality shows, which one would it be?
For me, it would be Singles Inferno.
Wow. You have to explain what that is for people that don't know it.
For sure. Singles Inferno is this Korean reality show where you're living on an island, kind of like Survivor. Maybe not necessarily Survivor because you're not completely taken away from all your comforts, but you're living off of base necessities and you're trying to date each other at the same time.
Right. And along with that dating, if you find someone, you go to Paradise, which is like a really fancy hotel. And everyone's pretty friendly with each other for the most part. You get these little games that you can play.
Yes.
But what would be your favorite part about going to Singles Inferno?
I think my favorite part of going to Singles Inferno is playing the games.
Mm,
Because they're not as serious nor as extreme as Survivor, so it feels like Survivor Light.
mm. I think for me, and what I've been repeating a lot of times is I want to be a part of The Circle on Netflix. Honestly, all I want is just to rest because what The Circle is a social experiment where you get these people and you put them in a room and no one sees each other, but you communicate through texting or what's supposed to be like a social media thread.
Yes.
And you are either pretending to be someone like you're catfishing or you're going in as yourself and your job is to be the most popular person there. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really interest me. I don't care about being the most popular person, but if you end up being on that show for a long time, you get to spend 2 weeks in isolation by yourself and you get to do puzzles, read books, cook. It just sounds so relaxing. You're
Fair.
just there, you have a bed. Every now and then you talk to people. I don't know, it sounds nice.
Totally. I mean, I would want to be in the circle as well, but I feel like the fact that I am not a very social person makes me a bad candidate for a social media reality show.
Well, that's why you just gotta lie to people.
I
That's how you get
guess.
them to like you.
I guess.
I think these concepts of reality show are very different than what we're gonna get from Snow Globe. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll get into that, but before we do, let's go into our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Everglow Handmade, founded by Rachel Larson. It is art that encourages you to see the good and celebrate it. What I really enjoy about Everglow Handmade are their stationery and paper goods. Rachel creates these beautiful cards for special occasions, and she also creates custom wedding paper goods and calligraphy as well. But I love her cards because it feels like every card that I've sent to someone I love feels personal, and it also feels like a work of art that I'm giving to them. You can learn more about her work and shop her goods through her website at Everglow Handmade. That's EverglowHandmade.com, and find them on Instagram at Everglow Handmade.
Yep, and that's going to be our recommendation for the week. So, first read of Snowglobe by Soyoung Park. In this first read, we've read through pages 1 through 77 and chapters 1 through 9, which are the Age of Snowglobe through to the Promised Land. Now, we've just started reading this book, and this is where we get our character intros. I think one thing that happens really well here is the introduction of this book is so well written that it immediately drops you into this space where you can recognize the entire environment around you.
The setting too is definitely very extreme,
Yeah,
which is why I feel like we're able to be dropped in and we figure out, oh my gosh, this is apocalyptic.
right. And the way that the author does it is very discreet. She
Mm.
describes the events that are happening around them. One is just warming up the water with a kettle, otherwise, the water is freezing. Talking about what kind of clothing they're wearing, how they're preparing, how, in certain degrees, children wouldn't go out, and describing the nature of what the people have to go through and are suffering through so that we not only get a sense of the climate or the world around them, but also we get a feel for the desperation and the sadness that kind of looms within the people that aren't in Snow Globe.
Mm-hmm. And it also, in comparison, shows just how much these people, the people who live outside of the snow globe, need snow globe to happen in order for them to feel like their lives are worth living.
Right. So let's talk about some of those people. The first family that we're introduced to seems to be the main one, which is Chobam's family.
Yes.
Within her family, we have her twin brother, who's Ongi.
Mm-hmm. And Ongi is very hot-headed, I think, is the word that comes to mind. And he doesn't seem brotherly.
He seems extremely brotherly in the sense
Mm,
of him wanting to bully Chobam and kind of have his way. He
I
seems like
see.
the big brother kind of role.
I see. The reason why I thought he wasn't brotherly is the reason why you say he sounds brotherly, because he seems to just bully her. And because they're twins, I felt like they wouldn't do that to each other.
I think just being siblings, there's always that possibility. He very much seems like the character from Avatar: The Last Airbender, Sokka,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that he kind of treats his sister and Aang, and like the way that
Yeah,
he kind of controls the room that way.
I see, I see. That makes more sense now.
He is not really a rule follower, but at the same time, he's very cautious with the way that he lives.
Mm-hmm.
We see Chobam on the other side being someone who's much more of a go-getter. And I think that's going to be something that separates their ability to prosper or to succeed within this world that they're living in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure.
We also get to see Chobam's mother, but very briefly. We don't really get a story about Chobam and Ongi's mother.
Well, the only story that we get is how the father was able to save them while she was still pregnant with the twins.
Right. And we know she works at the factory, but other than that, she seems caring. She seems like someone
Mm-hmm.
that does love her children, just has to work a lot.
Yes.
So in her stead, we have her grandmother who is, for the most part, doing that job of taking care of them.
Well, I think now they're taking care of her. I mean, she's at home with them, but she is suffering from dementia, so she kind of forgets who Chobam is and thinks that Chobam is Ongi's girlfriend.
Hmm. Yeah, and the grandmother still does things, right? I think it's probably more out of instinct than anything else.
Mm,
Because she was the one that went and warmed up the water kettle without anyone thinking about it, because
right.
she knew that the weather was cold. She probably still does a lot of the cooking at home. She's probably still doing the tasks that keeps the household running.
Mm,
Whereas the kids are now kind of getting to that age where they can do these things for themselves, but it's usually some kind of parental figure that still ends up running that household for a while.
True.
So that is Chobam's family. We are going to get to Chobahm, but let's first talk about this character, Miryu. I wanted to look up the names of the characters in Korean, but I just haven't been able to find that resource yet because I'm always curious how these names are pronounced.
Mm.
The Hangul version of a lot of these names are sometimes not well translated to the English or the alphabetical kind of system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to guess that it's Miryu. In fact, Snowglobe actually has the original Korean title on top in the cover,
Mm-hmm.
and that title is actually Snowball. So it's Snowball. I think there are going to be differences as we go along. What I've also noticed is that as the characters are being named, they're using their full names like you would in Korean, which sounds very awkward when you read it in English.
Mm.
So I think Chobam's last name is Chun.
Yes.
So you'll hear a lot of like Chun Chobam or Chunonggi, which is very familiar to someone that probably grew up in Korean customs, or I think Chinese and Japanese customs also do it. I honestly don't know, but I know for a fact Korean people do it, especially if you get in trouble. That's full name time, and you
Mm-hmm.
will use that full name. But going back to Miryu, because her name seemed a little bit awkward through the alphabetical system,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll call her Miryu for now until I can figure it out. Miryu is an ex-Snow Globe resident, which means that she was a participant within this world of television.
Right. But since she is an ex-actress, she had to reacclimate to life outside of Snowglobe, which unfortunately she isn't.
Right. And it's partially because the society doesn't accept her. During her time in Snow Globe, she was a participant that had to murder, I think, 8 people,
9.
9 people.
Yes.
And so the way the world sees her is that she is a murderer,
Mm-hmm.
and so no one should communicate with her.
Right.
Even her own family has kind of excommunicated themselves from her with the assumption that she won't be able to fit in with real life.
Mm-hmm.
So she is stuck in this place where she has no friends. She can't ride the bus because they won't let her on, so she can't really travel around.
Exactly.
This eventually leads to a series of incidents that introduce Miryu to Chobam. It also introduces us to this black limousine that comes around,
Mm-hmm.
which is the thing that eventually hospitalizes Miryu.
Right, because we think that she got hit by the limousine.
As far as we know, she also believes that. And that's what she's claiming as she's on her hospital bed and kind of on her deathbed as well.
Hmm. It makes me wonder if there's more to it than her being hit. Because in the limousine, Chobam notices that there's smashed glass on the floor.
Right. So you're thinking that Miryu might have been inside of the limousine?
Maybe for like a short time or something like that.
Hmm. Like they might have had a discussion and then she was hit by the car.
Either hit by the car or hit by one of the passengers.
I mean, very possible. This is also where we get the introduction to all the shady business that's happening around Snow Globe.
Mm-hmm.
Up till this point, we just know that there's a very desperate point amongst the civilians. But now we're starting to see kind of the antics that are running around the, I guess, officials of the Snow Globe residency.
Right.
We see a very short picture of who Miryu actually is.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I was even curious if she had completed these murders or if it was something that was more for show.
Mm.
But pretty soon we start to realize that murders aren't really restricted, nor are they frowned upon by the board of directors or whoever's in charge of the reality shows that is a part of Snow Globe.
Mm-hmm. It seems that there's so much death that looms over Snowglobe.
Yep. And speaking of death, that's where we start entering into Chobam's world. There is a massive trigger warning to all this, on top of the murders and things like that. For anyone that's uncomfortable with topics of suicide, there is a short portion in this book that does mention it. It seems like this book might mention it again,
Mm.
just from the telling of the stories that we're hearing. So just kind of keep yourself safe. And if this is something that brings up bad vibes, definitely kind of steer away from this section and, maybe just make yourself feel happier in some way.
Right. Find ways to take care of yourself.
Right. So we have a bad situation happen, which brings Chobam into the snow globe world.
Mm-hmm.
Up to this point, what we know of Chobam is what?
Up to this point, we know that she's a hard worker, that she's a high school graduate that just graduated a few months ago, and that she's very observant.
Right. She's also very courageous
Mm-hmm.
because she's one of the people that actually talked to Miryu in the first place. But not only that, she risked her life to try to save Miryu when she was injured and entering her deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
She has morals, she's a person of character. Almost clearly, this is our protagonist from what we can see.
Exactly.
The reason she becomes so important is that she's a lookalike of Hetty, which is this actress who has been on TV, and not only her, but her mother and her grandmother have had this generational TV show that has made her so popular.
Yes, we see that Hetty grows up with this television show.
Right. So the problem that we've come across is that with everything seemingly going well, we find out that Hetty has actually committed suicide. And so this leaves this empty void that the reality show thinks they can just fill with a lookalike character who is Chobahm.
Mm-hmm. And Chobahm kind of agrees that she does look like Hetty.
Right.
And we kind of see this Chekhov's gun slash foreshadowing that she does look like Hetty because her grandmother thinks that she's on TV.
Right. Which, ironically enough, she now will be with the introduction of director Cha.
Mm-hmm.
Director Cha is this childhood hero of Chobam's, who is the person also directing the show that Hetty's a part of. With the fame and the stature that Director Cha has, she holds this kind of power that starts to allure Chobam, which is the reason why Chobam does agree to go in the show in any sort of form.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, Chobam notices that things are starting to go awry. First, Director Cha is acting very aloof and cold towards Cooper. Cooper is an ex actor who seems to be living off of the director's whims, doing whatever she says because it's up to her whether or not he can stay in Snowglobe.
Mhm.
Later, though, we see that this cold and aloofness is more steely than we realize because when they're on the plane, Director Cha orders them to kill Cooper.
Right. And this order seemed like it was planned all along.
Mhm.
It didn't seem a spur of the moment detail because every part of it, including where Chobam was asked to sit and told that that was the best seat in the house, was planned to make sure that not only was Cooper dealt with, but also that Chobam got a front row seat to it all.
Exactly. So lots of diabolicalness.
Right. We see the maniacal character that is Director Cha, but there is seemingly a caring side to her, whether that is more based on the reality show or her personality. Because eventually we do get to Snow Globe. We get to the scene where Chobam is introduced to this world that was Hetty's,
Hmm.
and we see the transformation of Chobam into Hetty's character. This involves meeting Hetty's grandmother, Meryung, who has been in show business for 40 years or so. And we kind of get the veil dropped back pretty quickly of what these reality shows are.
Right, because it's all planned. It's all the director's movement. And I don't know if I would call Director Cha caring in that instance because Maryung is a little bit two-faced.
Mhm.
But I think it's more that she wanted to make sure that Meryung and Chobam work together because they're supposed to be these characters that like each other.
So you're saying Director Cha more fulfilled her role as a director rather than trying to bring Chobam into this world in a more kind way.
No, yeah, because up to this point, Director Cha hasn't been kind. So I don't think that kindness is gonna start showing up anytime soon.
Right. So where we leave off is Chobam in this new world. She is now living in Snow Globe. She is a part of this show called Go Around.
Mm-hmm.
The characters aren't getting along. There's a lot of animosity. Nothing seems like it'll go right.
Mm-hmm. We already see all the things that are going wrong.
Right. So, what are your thoughts on this book so far with everything that we've kind of come across?
I think that the story moves really quickly and it's fitting because of the story's apocalypticness.
Does this book remind you of any other book that you've read in the past?
I mean, similarly, it feels like Hunger Games by Susan Collins. I also think it's kind of like divergent because there are outcasts and there are people who are within this bubble.
Mm,
Yeah, I feel like most apocalyptic books, there's a bubble of very rich people and there's a outcast group.
mm. Without having read Divergent, I'm not sure what that book's like, but for me, it very much felt like Hunger Games. It felt like the character Snow, I can't remember his first name.
It's just President Snow.
Oh, President Snow. It felt like he was, in a sense, kind of like Director Cha, even though Director Cha's role was more a lower tier person.
Hmm.
So there has to be someone above Director Cha, I would assume, that's kind of running the whole show. But it very much gave off that same vibe of, like you said, people living in a bubble who are doing very well, who are affluent, and then the other people who are just trying to scrape by and finding ways to enjoy life whatever way they can.
Definitely. And I think another thing that I appreciated about just this beginning is that the clues are sprinkled in, but they're magnified by Chobam's observance.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I think it's a very good beginning.
Yeah, the writing is very well done, but to me, the translation feels a little rocky. It doesn't come off as fluid in certain instances.
Hmm.
Having done a portion of this book through reading and the other portion on audiobook, it also felt less genuine that I think the narrator wasn't Korean because some of the pronunciations of the names weren't even close to how they'd be pronounced in a version of Hanguk. So I didn't look up the name of the narrator. She's a seemingly good narrator, like she can do
Do
the
the
story well.
voices.
Yeah, exactly. But it's more the fact that the translation doesn't work well with her in certain instances,
Mhm.
but I'm still very interested and intrigued by this book. Do you have any predictions on this? Like what's going to happen? I feel like our first read was so limited in events, although it did lead up to where we are currently, but it felt much more character driven.
I would think the opposite. I think there were so many events in the first part, and now we might get into more of the character development of Chobam and how she acclimates or doesn't acclimate to Snowglobe.
Fair. What do you think is going to happen in our next read?
I think that Chobam is going to struggle with being heady, and behind the scenes, if there's a behind the scenes, Mary Young is going to continue being two-faced towards Chobam, and Chobam's going to forget a little bit more about who she truly is.
Hmm. I think that all sounds good. I don't have any idea where this story's going.
Hmm.
I figured that there's going to be some taking down of this government eventually. When we were first choosing this book, we did find out that it is duology, so the story won't end with this book, but I'm sure we'll get to some peaks and exciting points as we go through our read. So, what is going to be our second read of this book?
In our second read, we will be going through pages 78 through 159 in the physical copy, and for everyone, that's chapters 10, the Yibon Media Group, through 18 without a script.
Yep. And for anyone that's also reading with us and you kind of feel like you have a better idea of what's going on, also, this book was recommended to us by one of our listeners. So if you feel like you have a recommendation that you want us to read, how can people reach out to us?
You can reach out through email at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com or join the conversation on Instagram at asianbookclubpod.
Yep. And we have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, which have books that we've read in the past, books that we recommend, and books that we plan to read in the future.
And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast.
Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat!
Bye.
Bye!